Okay, step forward.
And you're good to go.
Great. So I'll just jump in. Thank you for being here. I apologize for the technical difficulties. That seems to be the norm so far the last few days for me, but we'll get it sorted out. I'm Rod Griffin. I'm Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. I think I probably have met or talked to most of you at some point. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Want to share with you today a number of things that we've been working on at Experian that are, I think, very unique, as well as some things that are going on in the industry that you may or may not be aware of. So give you a general update. If you go to the next slide, Rebecca. So on slide 2, want to talk about how things are changing in the credit reporting system and in the credit reporting world. Start with some things that we feel have been improved in the credit reporting universe. Talk about some things that have changed in credit reports and scores, as I said, that people may or may not be aware of. Talk about some things that have been removed from credit reports, which is a bit surprising to some folks. And then talk about what's been added, which is really talking about Experian Boost and the consumer ability to add information today. So if we jump to slide 3. I'll start with what we've improved and things we've been looking at. Over the course of the last year and a half, we've done a tremendous amount of work in trying to make communicating with us and interfacing with Experian easier. So one of the things we've done is greatly improved and enhanced our dispute process. If a person feels that they have something in their credit report is inaccurate, we want to make sure that we address that issue as smoothly, seamlessly, painlessly as possible. So to start the process today, if you go to experian.com/dispute and you do not have a current copy of your Experian credit report, we will provide one to you free of charge. So all you have to do is tell us some identifying information and we'll provide that report on screen through a secure encrypted system, so you have the most current information. It's something we've come across, and I've heard from people in the past, they think they have something to dispute because they have a report, and we give them a new report, and they find out the information is not there anymore because they're looking at an out-of-date report. I actually worked with a congressional office who had a person who was saying they had information in the report that was inaccurate, and talked to them, and it started to sound a little strange. And I said, well, when did you get this report? And they said, about 6 years ago. I said, well, that's the problem. And so we see that more often than you might think. So making sure that a person has a current copy of their report helps to make that process so much easier. And that's in addition to the free annual report. It's not, you still have access to the free annual report at annualcreditreport.com under federal law. You still have access to the free reports under state laws where you may reside. So it's an additional free report if you don't already have one. If you already have a consumer report, you can simply enter that report number and that report will pop up on screen. It ensures that we're looking at current information and makes that process easier. Once you have the report with our new dispute process, you simply select the items that you need to dispute. Just like a shopping cart, you press the button that says, I need to dispute this. We provide some education information as well around the content that you're looking at so that you know what it is, that you know more about what you might be asking, or making sure that what you're looking at is actually something that needs to be disputed. For example, we have people ask often about variations in name spelling. And those are not inaccuracies. They're representations of information that have been reported to us. We accurately are showing what lenders are telling us belong to you. So you may not need to dispute that. Could be a sign of fraud. Might just be a different name that you've used. I always use my dad as an example. He can't decide what his name is when he applies for credit. So every year we talk about, he gets his free report every year, and then he calls me and says, you have the right name on the report, but you also have names I don't want on there. Excuse me. And so I asked him, well, have you applied using the other names? Because his name's Adrian Dale Griffin. And he says, well, yes, I've applied as Adrian Griffin and Dale Griffin and A.D. Griffin and Adrian D. Griffin and A.D.A. Dale Griffin, and all of those names are on this report, but we should only have the right one. And I tell them, well, pick a name, and once you've decided what that name is, eventually that will be the only name on the report. But we include those to show what's been associated with you. So that education information can help a person better understand whether or not what they're looking at is accurate, whether or not it's something they need to dispute, whether it might be something that's an indicator of fraud. So we want to make sure people understand exactly what they're looking at, so that education information is new and helpful. But you simply now click Need to Dispute, and we'll walk you through that process. And at the end of that process, you click Submit, and all of the things you've disputed go into our dispute process system. We'll go directly to the sources. It speeds the process. We also help with the language that's used to dispute, so that it's a clear, direct, and succinct, so that we get the response that the consumer needs from the lender. Often, people tell me they want to use more words. They want to describe what led up to the issue. And unfortunately, they often do not get to the language that is specific to the credit report. They won't tell us, well, the account's not mine, or this is a fraudulent account, or I was never late. They talk about all of the life events that may have led to the issue, which we care about, but don't help us communicate what the problem is with the report. So we want to make sure it's accurate. So we help with that, with some short, succinct language that they can select from. If they have documentation they want to send with their disputes, they can upload that information. We will send every document that's provided to us, every paragraph, sentence, period, and comma that they provide will go to the source of that information as part of that dispute. So they'll receive it and should consider it as part of that process. So it's much easier, it's much faster. We're able to educate the consumer, and we make it much more effective in terms of dispute. So first thing that we've done. The other thing to know that's changed and been improved is that credit scores and collection accounts have been evolving in the way that they treat them. Medical collection accounts now are weighed less heavily or not at all. If you pay a collection today, the newest scores from FICO and Vantage Score will exclude them from the calculation. So a paid collection will potentially could immediately have a very positive impact on your credit scores. So very important to understand how collections are looked at and used and weighed in scoring systems. We also today hold medical collections for 6 months before we report them on the credit report to make sure that any issues with insurance or billing statements or billing disputes have been resolved, and that it is in fact a legitimate collection for the consumer. So really important that we have implemented that policy. The other thing to know is that with collections, especially with the newer scoring models, but even the older ones, collections now have less impact as they age. So the older they get, the less impact they're going to have on your credit scores. So paying them will help right away if you're able to. If you're unable to pay a collection, the further in the past they occurred, the less effect they will have on credit scores. So next slide. A few things about what's changed, and largely around fraud. With fraud alerts and file freezing, been some significant changes in the last year. We now keep what we call the initial security alert for 12 months from the date it's added. That used to be 90 days. So the initial alert says, I may be a victim of identity theft. Before granting credit my name, please verify my identity or call me, and you can give us a telephone number that we would provide with every single report that's accessed or requested, so that the lender or other business can call you if they need to, or we'll take steps to verify your identity. So that now lasts a full year. The extended fraud victim statement continues to remain for 7 years. You do need to provide a police report or valid identity theft report to add that victim statement. The victim statement says, I am a victim of identity theft or fraud. Please call me. You can provide 2 telephone numbers. Lenders must, and have for a number of years now, must respond to those alerts. So they are a very effective tool in stopping credit fraud resulting from identity theft. Perhaps one of the most notable changes and most covered in the media is that credit freezes are now free nationally. So anyone in the country can freeze their credit report at no cost. And once it's frozen, you can lift that freeze at no cost. We will lift the freeze for any length of time up to at a minimum of 24 hours. So you can lift the freeze for 24 hours up to permanently. So you can specify how long you would like to lift a freeze. You can be specific with regard to your lender. So a number of options as well, but it's available to anyone nationally. The other change is that adults, parents can now create a credit report if they desire to do so for their children. So they can tell us, I want to create a credit file for my minor child, and then freeze it. The debate and question is whether or not that's the right thing to do. If you're creating something that you're concerned could be then subsequently used for fraud, and so you freeze it, we leave that decision to the parent, but we will create a file and freeze it on behalf of that child. It's important that you do not lose that PIN number. So when the child turns 18, they can access their credit report. But otherwise, we have to reissue, and that can be a challenge a bit. Some things to know about freezes as well, in terms of what they actually do or do not do. And I think it's important that people think about what a freeze is before they add one to their file. A credit freeze only is triggered in the event someone uses your stolen identity to apply for new credit in your name. So it's a very narrow protection. I unfortunately often hear people say, if I freeze my credit file, I'll be safe from identity theft. And freezing a credit file does not prevent identity theft. It does not prevent a data breach. It does not prevent someone from stealing a computer or hacking into a personal system. It doesn't prevent someone from going through your trash and getting your identity. And so it provides another tool to help protect your identity or misuse of your identity, but it doesn't stop identity theft. So that's usually my biggest concern, is that someone has a false sense of security and doesn't understand what a freeze does and doesn't do. The other thing to know about freezes is that there are a fairly large number of exceptions. So law enforcement can still access your report. Creditors with whom you have existing relationships or businesses with whom you have existing relationships can still access your report when a freeze is in place. Apartments, if you're going to rent, leasing agents can access your credit report. Utilities can access your report when you apply. Employers can access your credit report even though a freeze may be in place. If you're applying for a job, you give them permission to access your report. So it's today a pretty limited tool in terms of impact. So I always caution people to make sure you understand what it does and doesn't do. It really is only triggered in the event someone uses your personal identity to try to apply for new credit. So a limited tool in the way that the law is now written, and the exceptions that are provided. So in many ways, I think the security alerts provide more protection, because every time a report's requested, lenders are notified, and the FACT Act, Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act, requires lenders to respond to those alerts, so they can't ignore them, and that's anytime a report's accessed. So, and they're both free, so freezes and alerts. The other thing to be aware of is something that we've referred to as a credit lock. It's very much like a freeze. We provide a lock as part of our premium monitoring service, and that enables you to lock and unlock your credit report through a mobile device. And so with a freeze, you're issued a PIN back to freezes. You can also typically lift a freeze now within a matter of a few minutes, as long as you have that PIN and the identifying information matches. You can do it online, do it by phone, do it by mail. So pretty convenient today, not like it used to be. 5 or 6 years ago, lifting a freeze was a very manual process. You would have to call us, a person would get a PIN, they would have to go into the computer system, find the report, and manually remove the freeze and then manually replace it. That's system's now been largely automated, so fairly rapid to do as well. But if you're interested in a credit lock, or you hear that term, that refers to a mobile device tool with Experian through our monitoring services, our credit monitoring services. So new service there.
We have a quick question in the chat box.
Yep. Sure.
From Shane, wouldn't the child be able to access their credit by the time they turn 18 anyway? What is the point of a parent being able to jumpstart it early?
Well, and that's the question. It's not that they're trying to jumpstart their credit. It's that parents are concerned about fraud or identity theft. So they feel that if they create a report and then immediately freeze that report, they're providing an additional protection for the child. And limiting the risk that a child's identity would be used for fraud, particularly credit fraud. We provide a number of services. If for example, a social security number that should not be, that would belong to a minor or that has not been issued is used, we notify the lender when they request a report. If a date of birth is used that belongs to a minor, we notify the lender when they request that report, if there's one on file, or even if there's not. So, creating a file to freeze it is what they're doing. It's not that they're trying to jumpstart their child's report. There wouldn't be any accounts on that report. It would just be identifying information and the freeze. But the parents feel more secure in doing that, and so the law says that we're obligated to do so, so we will.
There's a follow-up question. Is it available from all three major bureaus, and how can one request it?
Yes, freezes are available at no cost from all three bureaus. You need to go to each separately to add a freeze, and to do so at Experian, you just go to experian.com/freeze and follow the instructions. So there's a box you can click that says add a freeze to my report. There's a box that says I need to create a file or freeze my child's report, and simply follow the instructions. Really simple for us. You need to go to the other bureaus with a freeze. With the alerts, you only need to notify one bureau. We share the alerts with each other.
And so to create a child report, it's part of the freezing process?
Right. In order to place a freeze, there has to be a report. So you would tell us you want to create a file and freeze it. It's kind of all one process, but you would tell us the child's information. So we would create a file, a credit report, and then freeze it and provide the PIN number to the parent.
Thank you.
Any other questions there? Hearing none, let's move to slide. Okay, let's move to slide 5. What's been removed, and that's something new that in our world, you don't often hear of information being removed from credit reports permanently. I've been with Experian 22 years, and I think this is the first time we've actually decreased the information that's in a report. And what we've done is we've removed all civil judgments, basically all public records, with the exception of bankruptcy. So we've removed civil judgments. If you're sued and you lose, you owe a debt through the court. We've removed that from the credit report. Unpaid and paid tax liens are no longer part of a report. So it used to be that, Uncle Sam, if you didn't pay your taxes, an unpaid tax lien could remain in the report for 15 years. That was reduced to 10, and now we've removed them completely. Paid tax liens as well are no longer part of a report. A number of years ago, I include these because they're kind of amusing to me in a way. Parking tickets and library fines are no longer part of the credit report either. We used to include both, and I tell people a number of years ago, I used to get a lot of calls from people in San Diego who got parking tickets. I don't know, they were very draconian with their parking laws, apparently. Don't have to worry about that anymore. They're no longer part of your credit report. Library fines actually came off of reports 12 years ago. So we stopped reporting them a long time ago. But the reason we've done that, several things. One, the public record information affected a very small percentage of the population. So it was largely a very small group of people. It was also difficult to update that information, especially when you start looking at getting civil judgment information and court records from like small county courts, those sorts of things. So making sure we updated that information, maintained it, kept it current, and were able to dispute properly was very difficult. So really those two reasons. It wasn't very predictive for most of the population. It was difficult to maintain. And so we've removed that information. And the other issue was things like library fines, parking tickets. We found as the marketplace changed and consumer behavior changed, we're not very predictive of credit risk. And so we removed that information. It doesn't really have a huge effect for most people. If you had civil judgments, I suppose it may have helped scores a bit. The other thing that we found was that if you had civil judgments or you had unpaid tax liens or you had even things like parking tickets, you probably also had delinquencies with other accounts and were struggling with other credit issues. And so these didn't really have much effect on the whole. And it's really related to a market change in the way consumer behavior has changed over the years.
So we have some questions.
No longer care about those. Yeah, absolutely.
Is this change unique to Experian, or is it for all three credit bureaus?
It's all three credit bureaus. We had something called the National Consumer Assistance Plan, where we worked with attorneys general across the United States and proposed a number of things that we were going to do. And over the last 2 years or so, we've made these changes. So it's industry-wide.
Okay. Are foreclosures also removed, or are they still there?
Foreclosures are still part of the credit report. Foreclosures, even though they're a court action, they're related to a debt for home ownership. And so they're tied to a mortgage debt, and that continues to be reported.
Okay. And then the last one is, if there's a public record that has not been removed, does it need to be disputed?
Yes, dispute the public record. Again, bankruptcy will still be on the report. That's the one public record that remains. But if you still see a public record, dispute it, we should be able to remove it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none. So let's talk about what's been added. And this is perhaps
One more popped up really quickly, and then do you need the next slide?
Yeah, next slide. So
okay,
I'll be on slide 6.
Last question is, if someone owes property taxes and or income taxes, it's not on the reports.
Correct. Taxes, so paid or unpaid, are not part of a credit report. Now, I will add this. That doesn't mean lenders aren't looking at that information through other sources. So even though it's no longer in a credit report, will not affect credit scores directly. Organizations like LexisNexis are now actively collecting the information and marketing it for use by lenders and other businesses. So while it's not part of the report, they may still be considering that in those kinds of things, like tax liens and such, in their decisions. But it wouldn't be part of a report, and so would not affect traditional credit scores.
Thank you, and we've moved to the next slide.
Okay, so what's been added? I wish I could see everybody, because I would ask you to raise your hands and ask who's boosted. The Experian Boost is probably the biggest change I've seen in our industry since I've been part of it. Experian Boost was introduced in March of this year, and it is a first in the credit reporting industry. We hear all those cliche terms. It's groundbreaking. It's revolutionary, and the fact is, it is, and it's the first time that we've given people the ability to proactively add positive information to their credit reports and to control that process. So it's entirely permission-based. It is used by consumers to add their positive utility payments, so things like natural gas, water, electricity, and so on, and their telecom bills, so cable television potentially, cell phone bills, for example, they can now add to their credit report. The way that we do that is they go to Experian.com/boost. They give us permission to access their savings account or checking account that they use to make that payment each month. And so they tell us who their utility provider is. They give us permission to access their checking account to find that payment to, Kansas City Power and Light or whomever it might be. And we then capture that payment, pull it into the credit report as an account. And we can do that for each item that the consumer asks us to. So it could be a utility payment, it could be a water bill, it could be their cell phone bill. And for each of those, we would create a new account. And we can go back as far as 24 months, the initial addition of that information. And then it's reported as a positive entry each month going forward, just like a payment for any other account. So it's been had some really positive response. It's only with consumer permission. So if they choose not to, they can tell us to stop and we will. It's proving to be most effective, really where we thought it would be, with people with thin credit files, meaning fewer than 5 accounts, or credit scores below 680. And the reason is that when you're adding that positive information, it shows that a person who may not have had access to traditional kinds of credit in the past and would not qualify, gives them additional data points to say, look, even though I don't have, multiple credit accounts or I have a short history, doesn't mean I'm not a reliable payer. And so it's very credit-like and helps demonstrate that the person should be a good credit risk, even though they have not had a traditional credit report. And we believe that it's going to help drive financial inclusion, financial health, help people achieve financial objectives by gaining access to the traditional credit reporting system. We have some quotes. We've seen the average increase now is about 13 points. There's a person here that says their score went up 37 points. We're actually seeing average increases now for people with thin files about 19 points for 90% of people. It does not help everybody. We're seeing about 2 out of 3 people see a score improvement. So that's important to understand. It does not affect the efficacy of traditional credit scores. So if a person has poor scores because they're not paying their bills, they're not a good credit risk to begin with for traditional reasons, they're not going to see their scores suddenly jump up. It's really about showing that a person who has not had access to traditional credit or who is doing the right things helps them demonstrate that they should be a good credit risk and gives them the power to do that.
We have a bunch of questions.
Yeah, okay.
So first question, for the public records, when is that effective? Is that already in place?
It's already in place, yeah.
Okay.
So public records should be gone.
Is there any cost for Experian Boost, and is it only for Experian?
It's absolutely free. It does only affect your Experian credit report at this point.
Okay. Will people with overdrafts be negatively affected by Experian Boost?
No, because it's not looking at the account itself. It's looking for those payments that you tell us we can capture. So it's not looking at, what are your balances? It's not looking at, do you have a lot of savings? It's looking at where is that payment? And once we find that payment for X dollars, we capture that and pull it in. So it's not about that kind of information. It's just about that payment.
Oh, awesome. Is it retroactive? Does it count payments from before March 19th, 2019?
Yes. So we will go back 2 years if we can find payments in that account. And we'll go back up to 24 months and pull those payments in. So you could immediately see 24 months of payment history.
Okay. Does it only apply to utility accounts?
Say that again?
Does the Boost, do you only look at utility accounts or telecom payments? Is there anything else that's considered?
Yeah. Right now, it's only utility accounts and telecoms. So that's natural gas, water, electricity, cell phone, landline, if anybody knows what that is still. Cable television, satellite television would fall in there as well.
When it shows up on the credit reports,
control.
Is there like a section for Boost, or is it just showing up as if they're a creditor?
It just shows up as an account like any other account.
Does Boost know if the payment's a day late, or is it based on the making within the 30-day payment window?
Yeah, what we're looking at is that there was a payment made within that month. So, it's not, we don't see a day late, 30 days late. If it's reported late by the utility, we would see that. But that's the exception. And that's part of why we created Boost is utilities and telecoms would report negative information, particularly as collection accounts, that people didn't get credit for doing the right thing and paying those bills on time. And so this empowers them to do that and make sure we think of more as a full file report. And so they get credit for the positive actions as well.
Will rents be eventually included in Boost? Rental payments?
What will?
Will rental payments like
rental? Rental is separate, but you can also have your rent payments reported to Experian. I don't think I have it in this slide deck, but if you go to Experian.com or search Experian.com rent payments, there's a big long URL, but you can have your landlord report your positive rent payments to Experian. We were actually the first credit reporting company to enable that, and that's been 7 years now. But we work with third-party companies to collect the information and report it to us. So if you have a landlord or you're living in an apartment and it's a 1 unit in a house, that payment could be reported. If you live in a 10,000 unit complex, you can talk to the apartment complex management company. They can report that information. And so it has to be done by the landlord, not by the consumer. But what we're hearing and what I've heard is, if you have an apartment in a house, you can talk to your landlord and they'll approach it a number of ways. Now, first, Experian does not charge to have the rent payments reported, so there's no fee from us. However, the third-party companies may have a service fee and it's usually nominal that they would charge. And what we've heard is landlords in some cases will just pay the service charge as a benefit to a good renter. Sometimes they'll add a bit to the rent to cover that service charge. Sometimes they'll split it with the renter. So it just depends on how they arrange it. A big complex may spread that cost across multiple units, so it's pretty nominal. But the answer is yes, they can report their rent payments. We see almost 100% of the time with rent payments, people become scoreable for the first time or they move up in tier. So their scores get better. So separate process in addition to Boost.
Okay, and then we have, does Boost know if the amount is paid in full for utility bills, or do they get credit just for payment regardless of how much is paid?
You get credit for making the payment. So, our logic is if there's a payment there and there's not a delinquency reported, you paid as agreed.
And then can you change your mind once you turn it on? Can you opt out after you've opted in?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. So if you change your mind, decide you don't want to use Boost, you just tell us to stop, going to Experian.com/Boost, and you can tell us to stop reporting and we'll remove that information from the report.
Thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Cool. So slide 7, we probably already covered most of the rest. But slide 7, Boost is really the first time we put people in control of having information added. So it really set our competitors on their heels. And it's part of a commitment that our executives have made. We are committed to giving consumers more control over how information is used and reported, how it affects their scores, and to give them options. We think that's where the future is. And our objective is to be a partner in the process of helping people connect with financial services and helping business connect with new customers and supporting their customers. We don't want credit reports and scores to be barriers. Sometimes no is the right answer, but if we can become a partner with consumers and help them understand what a credit report is, how it works, and have a greater role in that process, and help us have information that can help them, we think that's going to be a win for everybody. And so that's what we're trying to do. We estimate there are 100 million people within credit files, and so helping them gain access to credit is going to be a very powerful tool. The other thing that we believe is that this kind of service can help people break cycles of predatory lending, being caught in payday loan systems, title loans, because they're able to qualify for lower cost services and traditional credit services that can save them money and help them improve their financial well-being. So that's our goal. Next slide. We've introduced Boost already. So it's really about control for the consumer and about information that we think is credit-like. We actually studied, we have something called data labs, and they look at information use and how it will affect lending decisions, how it will affect consumers. And they studied it for a number of years before we launched Boost to make sure that it wasn't going to alter the effectiveness of credit scores, that it was going to actually improve their predictiveness by helping identify people who should qualify but who didn't previously, and not qualified people who should not be qualified. So very important, and it is, we think, a game changer in the credit reporting world. Slide 9, a little bit more on how the process works. It's free. You enroll in Boost and become an Experian member. They get a free membership. You provide us consent. We connect your accounts and then validate their utility telco payments. I would add too that when you sign up, if a person comes in and says, I think this account is in my checking account, so on my cell phone bill, we'll go in and check. If we find other payments that, when we do the initial review, that may qualify, we'll ask the consumer if they would like to add them, and it's their choice. So if they tell us, we had one I thought I wanted to add, but there are 4 others, they can say, yeah, I'd like to add those too, or not. And if they choose not to, we won't. So so it's, again, up to the consumer. We try to help them identify where they can help their credit history, their credit scores on the initial enrollment. We provide a free FICO 8 score at the beginning of the process. And then once we complete that process, we provide a free FICO 8 score at the end, so you can see whether or not your score has been boosted. As I said, most people do see some increase. And I've talked to people with scores in the mid 700s who actually see their scores improve a bit. So it can help everybody if their credit history is amenable to that, I guess is a way to put it. And as I said, you can choose to stop at any time, and we'll remove that information. So the next slide. Just some of the benefits. You may see immediate improvement in your scores, and with the free FICO 8 scores, you'll see that right away. It helps you become better qualified for better terms and rates. It gives you additional, what we call trade lines, which just means accounts, to be scored and to move into more favorable score bands, so to move up in tier, as we describe it. So you may be able to qualify for better rates if your scores, particularly if they fall on on a margin. So if you are close but not quite there, they could push you into that better and more favorable band. So we are seeing that, hearing that from consumers, and are really excited about the fact that it's helping people. And I think with the holidays coming, it's going to be really exciting to hear from people who say, hey, I was able to get better rates and have a better holiday season. Next slide, for no questions. A bit more data. What we are seeing is that 2 and 3 see instant improvement. We're actually seeing that 15% or more improve their score band. And as I said, people within files, we're seeing score improvements on average of 19 points. So that's not a small increase. If you're at a 680 and you see an almost 20-point increase, you're talking about moving into the 700 range, which moves you potentially from high subprime to low prime, which could be a significant difference. It's free for everybody, and we believe it's empowering. Next slide. It's just, for us, Boost is a beginning. We're looking at other tools and resources in the coming months and years to empower consumers to use your data more effectively, to help them achieve their financial goals and dreams, and actually to put people in control. And that's a radical idea in our industry. And I think Rebecca, we worked together for a long time and been around the industry, would probably say that is a very different notion than what we've had in the past. So it's a brand new idea. We just launched are launching a new service called Lift. It's a new score that's looking at alternative data for lenders that we think is going to do the same thing. It was just a news release. So we're moving pretty rapidly into the space of using information that hasn't been before to help people become more financially successful. So really exciting and new times for us. And with that, that's the end of my slides. I'm open to any questions you have, whether it's about this or any other issues that I might be able to help with.
We don't have any current questions. I do want to say thank you for presenting to us. We did have one question pop up. Do you have any details on the free credit monitoring for the military?
Off the top of my head, no. I mean, it's being implemented. If you go to Experian.com, you can find the link to do so. And I should be more familiar than I am right now. But it's monitoring for active duty personnel and operates very much the same way that our other monitoring services do. But we'll just have to go through the enrollment process.
We have a question about whether or not this will be available. It is being recorded, and the link to the recording and the slides will be sent out as soon as I can get it uploaded. Another question, have you had any pushback from consumers for the need to monitor their checking accounts?
Not much, if at all. It's because of the way it's structured. We go in and it's very transparent and it's very specific to the payment. So we're not weighing the entire checking account data. So it's just about giving us permission to find that payment. So I think that more or less the limited nature of what we're trying to do, people have been comfortable with, and what the results they're seeing, and the fact that they have control over it, I think it is a huge way to help make people be comfortable, and to build that trust, that it's a limited access and that it's consumer controlled, and that's the big one. That you can tell us to stop, and we will.
We have some folks saying thanks, and that the concept sounds great, and thank you for the useful update. What about possibility of fraud giving access to checking account?
Yeah, and fraud is always a concern, and that's why we go about it the way we do. We actually work with another organization called Finicity. So Experian does not directly access that checking account or savings account. We work with Finicity. Everything that we do is encrypted. It's tokenized, and it's, as they say, it's encrypted and secured both at rest and in motion in our industry. So it's never not encrypted. So we do everything we can to make sure that that information is not exposed inappropriately to anyone, and it's used for the purposes that are specified. Fraud, and particularly data access and unauthorized access, is our greatest fear. I mean, you look at what happened to our competitor, and so that's the thing that worries us more than anything. I could tell you personal experience. I jokingly tell my facility manager now in Texas, where I was office, that she evicted me. I now work remote because they hired so many people for data security and to manage data security and oversee it and implement it. They needed my office space, so they asked if I would work remotely because I was the only person in my team there. So we invest heavily, very heavily, in data security. I don't know if there's much more I can say. There's always risk. We always recognize that, but we do everything we can to mitigate it.
So that appears to be the, oh wait, one more. Will Experian allow people to save their credit reports as PDFs when they pull them off, as opposed to having to print them immediately?
Don't know that we're allowing them to save them as PDFs. That it kind of goes back to that security issue. Who's pulling reports, where they save, and what's the risk? But right now, I do need to. We recommend you print it.
And I will just say, if it's your choice, a lot of computers allow you to print to PDF. That's something to consider. Okay, that seems to have been the last question. Thank you guys all for attending. Thank you again for presenting, Rod. And if you guys have any questions, you can just let me know. We'll get everything out as soon as possible. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you so much.